or it's hard labor donation. It's going to take all of us to build back our city. And I'm not a St. Louis resident. This is my favorite place in the world. I would always choose to live here again and again. I would still choose to live in the Central West End, in this great city. And if people listening feel that, or have ever lived here and felt that, I just urge you to keep us top of mind right now. This tragedy isn't, it's not a car accident. You just drive by on the highway and move on. It's our whole life right now.
Allie Rand is with us. She is a local tornado volunteer coordinator. What's the best story you have for our listening audience in terms of gratitude where one resident was just overwhelmed by something that some volunteer did or some contribution?
Oh, there's so many. Makes me tear up a little bit because there's so many amazing stories out here. But my personal story is there's a woman, a 95-year-old woman who was on Waterman. Her name is Mrs. Tops. I don't know if she'll hear this, but if she does, I met her and I felt like I had met my grandma who passed away when I was little. She just had that same type of hug, and we just instantly connected. She has a son named Floyd. They live on Waterman Place. They lost their roof. They were just the kindest, most thankful, humblest mother-son duo. And they call me very frequently. They want me to bring the kids over there. I have 5 little kids. Once I kind of settle down with tornado stuff, that's going to be an absolute. My kids would absolutely love them. And we were able to tarp her roof for her pro bono. She had kept getting charges, $5,000 to put this tarp up. These things are so ridiculous. Like, people don't have this kind of money to just be spending just to cover their belongings. So she now has a tarp on her roof, and it's a day-by-day process. But she is someone that instantly when I met her, I felt like, I hate that this tornado led me to her, but I have to see the positives, that there's just so many people here that we were always meant to be friends. And yeah, Missy, thank you for asking that, because I think any volunteer you talk to down here will tell you their personal connection to someone that's going to be a lifelong friendship.
Allie Rand, thank you, volunteer coordinator,
Yes,
just making such a difference and using this tragedy as a way to really change lives and connect lives, so needed in our community. There is a storage container at Enright and Union that Allie and other volunteers that she is helping to coordinate. Can you, in the last 30 seconds here, what are the items that you want people to drop off today, tomorrow, in the coming days to be put in that storage container so that you guys can distribute boots on the ground to the people who need it most?
Absolutely. Gift cards. I know it sounds like you're not helping that much because it's not something like super tangible, but it is liquid gold right now. So Home Depot's, Lowe's, Walmart, Amazon, Target, those are amazing. Schnucks is always great. Most neighbors can have easy access to Schnucks, so that's amazing. We can continue to use tarps, window boarding materials, so plywood, lumber, nails, caulk, roofing tape. We're pretty good on rakes right now, but any yard materials are always great. We're always looking for more saws, more chainsaws. And with my 5 seconds I have left, any skilled laborers, if you could give me just one day pro bono, I promise you the return on investment would be incredible. We would see your work come to life, and there's just skill set out there that I can't do. So if we could add to our contractor team, pro bono, just give me a day. It will be more than worth your while.
We want to tell you that Ben with Timberline has just texted in and said, have her call us to get that tree. So we'll send you the number, and we may make things happen here. That'd be great.
I love you guys. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
No, we really appreciate you coming. A couple of other notes. Thank you so much, Allie, that we want to tell you about. This coming Saturday, it was such a giant success that we are, KTRS is partnering up again with the Jason Tatum Foundation as well as St. Louis Area Food Bank. And we will have a food drive at Chaminade High School through the middle of the day on Saturday. So mark your calendars and you can just do a drive-by drop-off. Really, really was helpful and being used by people who need it most in our community right now. So that's another way you can help. And then also just announced the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra is going to be doing a benefit concert to support Urban League's Disaster Relief Fund. That is coming up on Sunday, June 29th. It's all you have to do is go to slso.org. Donations accepted also through the Urban League, and all of the money raised is going to go there. And it's one of those pay what you can concerts, but a simple way for you to enjoy an evening with one of our great St. Louis institutions and do some real good as well. Okay, we'll be right back in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about our friends at Premier Heating and Cooling. Speaking of skilled people, Premier is one of those companies that has a double whammy that just doesn't exist a lot in their business. They care a lot about customer service, so much that they train their technicians 5 years and beyond, because they want to make sure they have the best in the business, who will be the most professional in the business. And they also value those technicians and treat them extremely well. So I had a technician out doing some work at my house, and he said, I've never worked anywhere where they cared about us as much as they seem to here. And they just really want to make sure that we're happy. So we're here for the long haul. PremierHeatingandCooling.net is where you can go online to see about all the different products that they can sell you if you need a new unit. But if you just have a question about, is this normal? Should my air conditioner be cooling faster? We've had a little bit of a break this year, you guys. We haven't had that hot weather we often get mid-May into mid-June. So you have a chance, if you've been procrastinating or maybe the storm set you back, you still have time to set up that clean and check appointment to make sure your air conditioner is running beautifully all season long. 636-916-1122, PremierHeatingCooling.net.
A message from the Master. If you are looking for that one-of-a-kind gift
We're adding video to the equation. Is it up right now on KTRS.com, the video? Is it up now? Yes. All right. And this is going to be kind of a daily occurrence as KTRS continues to expand.
Well, Frank, you're always on camera.
Yeah, I don't really need
You
it.
can't get away from it.
No, but it's a great idea for the radio station to do that. I wonder, like, do you think more people where it's been established at radio stations listen to it on their laptop or on their phone with the video, or just listen with audio? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Come
Go
close
ahead,
a little.
Mitch. Come talk to us on the mic.
Yeah,
We've got our
I'm very curious about
I think
this.
someone would repeat my opinion. I think it's more a method of convenience. If you're in your car, you're going to tune in on the radio.
Obviously.
But if you're eating lunch or breakfast or just kind of sitting somewhere where you can throw up the video, sometimes you want to see who's talking.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Oh yeah, it really is great. And I talk to people all the time who listen on the app, who listen later, Frank, to the show
Yes.
on the podcast. It's just a whole new world. And these are great conversations. I mean, Allie was amazing. So I'm glad you did tune in. Speaking of which, we heard from a lot of you early in the show. Frank brought up the idea, the famous Charles Barkley perspective, which we shouldn't be worshiping our sports heroes. They shouldn't be heroes at all. That should be your parents. And a couple other people said, yeah, but it's also they're high profile. They make a big difference, especially kids look up to them. So they should be acting accordingly for the money they're paid and what they do. That's
Yeah,
one perspective.
I think that's a good way of looking at it, even though they don't want to be, and I don't think they should be. A lot of times they are to some kids. So don't be a knucklehead.
And of course, Frank always looked up to Rick Pitino, so he didn't follow the.
Yes.
A lot of people weighing in on this idea of whether the Rams money should be used to help get things shored up at the county animal shelter because of some big problems there. Several people in a row said, give the money to the animals. They can't help themselves. Yes, give them the money. And somebody else pointing out, nope, Rams money should be used to replace the lost attraction of tourism when we lost the football team, not on stray dogs or picking up limbs. That's a bit of I think a diminishment of picking up limbs is a bit of a diminishment of what the real issue
Yeah.
is for those. And then, a couple people saying they love the grandpa story. If Frank were a character on The Sopranos, he would be Frankie the granddaddy of them all, Cusimano. That's
There
what
was a
Craig.
Dr. Cusimano. They pronounced
It was
Cusimano.
his neighbor.
Yep.
Yeah, he was kind of this. He wasn't as cool as the Sopranos.
No.
if I remember correctly. Kind of a lame.
But when that show
doctor.
first came out, I got about 50 phone calls. Are you related or what? Did you know your name's in there? Or?
From the 314, they have to get this animal shelter under control. And I don't care where the funds come from. Page giving $10 million to UMSL to tear down buildings questionable. So, yeah, a lot of that. Somebody else saying they are familiar with the Sunday Scaries or Sunday Scares. And a couple people want you to plan their next vacation in Hilton Head. They want to know where you stayed, where you took your dog, all the things, because they think it sounds like you had a pretty good week. And it does sound like you did have a pretty good week.
Yes. And let's see, where we stayed, it's called Sea Pines, and it's by the lighthouse in Harbor Town.
Yeah.
So,
And have you actually vacationed exactly there before, or was this the first time?
we probably about 5 or 6 miles from it. Yeah. So, yeah, we've been in that area twice, though, in general.
Yeah. And pretty easy to get down there, direct flight from St. Louis these days.
Exactly. Well, we flew into Savannah and drove, and it's really easy. Yeah. And then, of course, there's a Costco. So you just pull into that Costco, get all your groceries, and you drive right to the place.
I like Savannah. I think it's
Yeah.
a cool town. Have you spent much time there?
We've had some lunches there. It is a cool town. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Historic architecture and just those. Don't you love those southern trees with the moss?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And it just covers the road. It's like you're never in the sun when you're riding your bike or you're walking because the trees just encompass the road. Yeah, it's spectacular.
Yeah, we don't have anything quite like that around here. We do have a lot coming up in the next hour of the show. Some great interviews coming your way, including our old friend Jody Davis, a name you might not have heard for a while, but many of you remember him for the big impact he had on local reporting here in St. Louis during his career at Channel 5. And then we'll also be talking to John Sauter from a local law firm, Cordell & Cordell, who is going to remind us of all those things we really should be thinking about when it comes to trust and estates, thinking about transferring what we have to the next generation. Lots more in the show coming up right after the news. Jill Show. Jill Farmer, Frank Cusimano in the house on this Monday. If you were a fan of Channel 5 News in the 80s and 90s, and I think most of you were because they were incredibly dominant in the market during that time frame, you will remember our next guest. He was a very popular investigative and consumer reporter in St. Louis at Channel 5 during what many would consider the heyday of TV news, at a station that enjoyed dominance as a favorite of viewers here in St. Louis. He came as a popular reporter, I believe, if my memory serves me, from Indianapolis, and from here, after his years in St. Louis, went on with stints on the national scene in CNN and other national business news outlets. He is Jody Davis. It is great to have you on the show today. Jody, did I get any of that right, or all of it right?
As I live and breathe, Jill Farmer, my dogged I shouldn't say colleague, my dogged enemy, competitor, Contact 2, she had me so scared.
Oh, yeah, right.
You did so
I
well.
was chasing you around town.
You were so great. And when you took over from Mandy, you were so great. And the funny thing is that Mandy and you and I were so friendly, as were Pat Malloy with us at Channel 4 and others at KMOV, where, of course, I ended up going eventually. But I'm really touched that you reached out to me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here today. And of course, you and Frank Cusimano crossed paths for at least a short time during the Channel 5 years, I believe.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Frank was the fresh-faced kid.
Yeah, I got there in April of 93, and you stayed there for how long after that?
I left 5 in, now let's see, I don't want to get this wrong, June of 94.
That's right.
So we overlapped for a year.
Yeah. How about your most combative or like stress-filled investigative report where you broke something really big, and you did that quite often, where it really got heated? They didn't want to hear it, but you knew you had it right.
Shit. You got all day? I understand this is 10 or 12 minutes.
Number one.
Oh, boy. All right. So the first one before you got there was, and it was very shortly after I got there, was, do you remember National Supermarkets?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was one on Grand Avenue, close to Grand and Penrose by the old Key Malls. Yep.
Yeah, there were quite a few of them. So we got some complaints that they were putting labels over labels on packaged meats in, like the grab-and-go deli section. And what they were doing was they were extending expired dates.
Ooh.
And we found this at several of them. And there you go. We caught him. At the time, Attorney General was Bill Webster, and he's issued a cease and desist. And that was the first one. Now, let's see some others.
I can think of one, Jody, that I think was one of the biggest stories ever in that era, and you broke it, and we were all chasing our tails trying to catch up with you. And I can't remember the name of the mortgage company, but they were a local mortgage company that got in financial trouble and did not tell its customers that it was not actually paying off mortgages when people were refinancing with them, and leaving people with 2 mortgages when they thought that they were just refinancing with this new company. That was a huge story that got national coverage.
Oh, ye of brilliant memory. Yeah, that was great. I don't remember the name of the company. I do remember that they were in St. Charles County, and I think St. Charles City, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was a big one.
So that day, it's funny because I went out there based on 2 complaints that we got that people were getting dunning notices after they had arranged a second mortgage through them. And it's like, no, that's supposed to be paid off. So when you get 2 of those in a very short amount of time, we're going to check this out. And they had pulled up stakes and left. And when I got there, there's my other competitor, although he wasn't technically consumer, Jamie Ullman. And Jamie and we were friendly. we're going, wow, what do we do from here? So I had done a couple of stories with Zane Yates. Do you remember State Representative Zane Yates? I think he became a judge.
Mm-hmm.
And Zane was on the House Banking Committee of Missouri. So I got in touch with him and I let him know. I said, I know you usually watch us, but just to let you know ahead of time if you want to do anything with this. And then I got in touch with my friend, and he was my friend as he came to my goodbye party, as well as a great source, Assistant Attorney General of Illinois, Dennis Orsi.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Dennis, do you have a mortgage broker law in Illinois? I have to believe you do, but there is none in Missouri. And he went and he checked, he called me back, and he said, yeah, of course we do. I said, can you fax? There's a great word. Can you fax me the law? And he faxed me the law, and I faxed it to Zane. And this is at the end of the legislative session. So Zane writes a bill based largely on the Illinois law, and rams it through, and gets it to Governor Carnahan. And I'm telling you, there were like maybe 3 days left in the session. And sure enough, the governor, may he rest in peace, signed it, and it became law. And yeah, that one still gets my heart beating.
Jody Davis is with us on the Frank and Jill Show on the Big 550 KTRS. It's not quite as prevalent now, but back when you were doing it, and for maybe 20 years after that, an investigative report or a series could like win a ratings book. It was a reason to watch, especially if it was properly promoted. And back then, everything was properly promoted, not as much now. But can you touch on the impact that some of those reports actually had on ratings?
Oh, goodness, yes. Now, at the time, as Jill mentioned, 5 was a juggernaut with a capital J. And it became even more of one when we had a good series. And our management made sure that I had some really sexy stuff coming in the ratings months, February, May, not so much in July and November. And we would get, of course, the Nielsen overnights. We were, as a matter of fact, we may have been one of the smaller markets to get the overnights at that time in 89, 90, 91, 92. And we would see the overnights from those stories, those that I mentioned, especially, I don't know if you remember, Bally's Vic Tanny. We found that they were signing names onto contracts without the people's permissions and forging. And the other one, the big one, was Best Buy. And we found that they were baiting and switching. So we put all of those. Some of them were individuals with follow-ups. Some of them were series. And we would look at the overnights, and we would get shares in the 40s. Now, for everybody at home, you guys know, but for everybody at home, a rating is the number of people watching you versus the number of people who have televisions. Shares are the number of people watching you versus the number of people watching television at that time. And we had 43% of the people watching television with some of those exposés.
Yeah, the numbers were just astronomical. And then of people that were paying attention and just had the habit of tuning in to their nightly news every night. And you were a big draw for a lot of people in this market. Do I remember right, Jody, that you came from Boston? I know East Coast, but are you originally from Boston?
I am a Bronx, Long Island boy.
Okay.
And I went to college in Boston.
Okay. I knew there was some connection. So what was it like for you? You spent a little time in Indianapolis before here, but what was it like for you coming from the East Coast to the Midwest, and particularly what was it like transitioning to St. Louis?
Oh, darling, I my first TV job was in South Central Nebraska.
Okay.
You take the Jewish kid from Long Island and you put him in South Central Nebraska. That was a trip. And then, I've worked in some other smaller markets, and then before Indy was Louisville, which is a nice sized market. I really enjoyed my 3 years there. I love my 3 years in Indianapolis, and I was at the end of my contract, and I was all ready to sign another one. And then Julie Carey, my dear friend who worked with me in Indy, and then also, of course, at 5, gives me a call and says that the consumer position is now open and they're looking for more teeth, sharper teeth in the franchise. So she says, get me a tape. And that's what happened. And I would have stayed in Indy, but in Indy, I shared it with another guy who actually took me in. He was the best known consumer reporter in the market. And they elevated him, kind of like what they did to Mandy. They elevated him to the anchor chair. So he would still do the stories, but he didn't have enough time to do as much as he did. So they said, we're going to give you a partner. We'll do a nationwide search unless there's somebody here you think would be good. He named me. And like I tell people, I've been telling people for all these years, I found that I was born to do it. And then with St. Louis calling, and the increase in pay and having a chance to start a franchise, just me from the ground up. Yeah. How do you say no to that?
Before we let you go, Jody, tell our listening audience how you're occupying your time now and where are you?
The penitentiary, and no, I'm happily retired. I'm in Southwest Florida. And it's wonderful, except when people named Milton and Ian, whatever, Ian, come by and pay you a visit. But no, it's wonderful down here. I'm enjoying retirement. I ride my bike a lot. I've managed to shed some pounds, and I got back into coin collecting. And if there are any burglars listening, I sold all my rare coins. I'm only doing like nickels, dimes, and quarters now, okay?
I love it. Jody, it was really good to hear your voice again. Thanks for being nice to that Cub reporter who was trying to keep up with you unsuccessfully, I might add, during your great career here in St. Louis.
You were more than that, my little Drake lady.
Very, very good to have you on the show today and catch up. And I know our listeners enjoyed reminiscing with you a bit. Jody Davis, former Channel 5 reporter, retired now in Florida. Sounds like a pretty good life, doesn't it, Frank? Thanks,
Yes,
Jody.
it does.
Thanks, gang.
Hey, our friends at Woods Basement Systems have not had the quietest spring in the life of their work, and that's okay. They like to be busy. They like to be helping people like you solve even the trickiest basement waterproofing problems. And St. Louis has given them a lot to work with. I know, I think I've heard from a number of folks and friends around the station here that the sump pump has been running full board for the last several weeks here because we've got saturated ground. We have continued rain. We mentioned we haven't had enough hot weather to kind of knock some of that the cold fronts out of the system. And so we've gotten really dumped on. It's one of those things that people say if you live in your house long enough in St. Louis and you have a basement, at some point the water's going to find its way in. That's never fun to have to deal with. But the good news is when we have a company that is as excellent at what it does as Woods Basement Systems, they can take what is a very negative experience for most of it and turn it into a positive. They can take that basement that always has maybe smelled a little funny or isn't what you want it to be and turn it into a place in your house that you absolutely love. All you have to do is reach out, set that appointment with them, have them come out and do a consultation and let you know what your options are. And they'll try to work with you in every way possible to make sure that your home is one that you love living in, that's safe, and that doesn't have long-term water or mold problems. Reach out to them today at 618-708-4055 or woodsbasementsystems.com.
Hey, it's John Carney, and I know you're thinking, wait a minute, I just heard you do an Allen Roofing commercial. You know what? Well, because
They drive the region's economy and contribute to its social and cultural well-being. At Elmsville, more is what moves us. Find your more and build more connections at more.umsl.edu.
Song.
Listing some of the essential artists that impacted his life that he likes to listen to. Not surprisingly, most of them were from the, I would say 60s, 70s, early 80s. And one of them, though, I think to both Connor and I stood out as an
I
artist.
think it was surprised Frank, too.
Yeah,
when he realized the name was on the list.
We were not expecting to see it on the list. So see if you recognize the song from the late 80s as well as the artist. Who this artist is and why you like him so much.
Taylor Dane. In fact, you picked my favorite song of hers. Yeah, I thought she's just spectacular. She doesn't look like the Taylor Dane I remember, though. Have you taken a look at Taylor Dane lately?
I haven't. I just saw the original video on YouTube when I was listening to the song this morning.
Wasn't that a great song, by the way?
Yeah, it was fun. I actually, that was like late high school going into college for me. So I would have considered her a lot more bubblegum pop than most of your, you tended to like more of the R&B, real musician, their musicality of a lot of the artists you like was a little bit higher on the list. She had a great voice.
She did. And she was pretty hot there for a while. I mean, in terms of songs.
Yes. And is that was purely the songs that had nothing to do with her 80s looks that drew you to be a big fan?
So wildly in love with Monique, I would never look at another woman.
Okay, good.
So, but she had a great little run there.
And were you familiar with her or any of her songs, or was she popular enough, Connor? To
no,
was
not really ever familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Her stuff has not probably stood the test of time.
No, you're right. She was hot for a couple years and boom. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of songs.
She's now 63 and she is still active. So I wonder if a girl like that, a woman like that who didn't have a long, unbelievable career, I wonder if she can still do concerts and she draw people.
Yeah, you'll see stuff like they have an 80s cruise and it'll be people like Debbie Gibson and your favorite Rick Springfield and some of the people that were.
Have you ever gone on an 80s cruise?
I haven't, but I have friends and they're actually younger than me. So the music would have been slightly ahead of their time that have gone and said it is absolutely a blast to see all these artists singing those songs from that era. Connor, you watched the men's final of the French Open. I got to see just a little of the
Coco?
Women's final.
She was great
with Coco. I
love her.
The first set, hard fought. I thought, whoever wins this set is going to win it, and she did not win it and left it all on the table. I thought, but came back. Excellent tennis. I didn't get to see all of it, but at the end of it, did you see Frank? She laid down on the court. And she had a great interview on the Today Show. I highly recommend people look it up and watch it today. And they asked her, they said, after you won it as a junior, you swore you'd never lay down on that clay again because that stuff is like concrete when it gets into your pores. And she said, I didn't plan on doing it, but I just couldn't help it. Here's what she said about it. I mean, she laid down all the way, just on her back for a couple minutes there.
I thought her opponent, Sabalenka, she was not unbelievably gracious. Did you see
She
that?
was not. In fact, she said
she wasn't.
She didn't. I believe it was on the lines of she felt like Coco didn't win.
Yeah,
instead that she lost.
Yeah, she played not as well as she should have. Now she kind of she backtracked a little bit 24 hours later, but still.
In the heat of the moment, sometimes people are not as gracious losers as they often are later.
By the way, the whole clay thing, like in Hilton Head, they had clay pickleball courts.
Yeah, I like that.
I don't.
You don't like that? It's supposed to be better on your knees.
Oh, well, that's
I
a positive.
played on clay for when I played in a women's tennis league for a number of years because they said it was supposed to be better. It was before I had my knee replaced. I do think it was good for that, but I tell you what, I fell down a couple times and skinned my knee, and it took me a week to get all that clay out of the
Yeah.
skin knee.
And you
It
can't
was
can't
kinda
wear white
gross.
shoes. Got to wear some other
Yeah.
kind of shoes.
There are clubs here in St. Louis
Yeah.
that playing pickleball, you have to be in all white too, which is
Really?
crazy. Yeah.
Like it's Wimbledon rules?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on. Give me a
Yeah,
break.
I'd say, yeah, I've heard there's quite a few of them that stick to that. Well, someplace else that can tell you about all the rules, especially when it comes to your taxes, are our friends at Capital Advisory Group. Jeff Zufall, of course, is a senior tax strategist, which means it's the simplest way of saying he knows more about taxes than most of us in his little finger that most of us will ever know in our lifetime. And he knows a lot about wealth management and about how to make sure that your money works for you, even in years where the stock market is up and down a bit, as it has been this year. Jeff, of course, the author of the #1 bestseller on taxes, Keep What's Yours. That's the show he does every single weekend here with our own Josh Gilbert, where you're always going to get a lot of really useful information in a way that's digestible and understandable, even for those of us who don't live, eat, and breathe in the financial services industry. Jeff really loves helping people, even those who are like, I haven't done what I needed to do. I'm not sure I saved enough money. I may have overpaid on my taxes. He doesn't care where you are on the wealth scale. He wants to make sure that you reach your goals in the long term. He can be reached at capitaladvisorygrp.com, or better yet, set up an appointment with Jeff and his team at 636-394-5524.
Speed excitement of IndyCar racing as the cars and stars take to the track. Enjoy the action from the best vantage point at the Bommarito Turn 4 Hospitality Unit, where they'll be hosting a Bommarito-style party. You can learn more about it. Book your place now at Bommarito.com.
Many of you, we get to a certain place on the pathway of life, and stuff that we've ignored should not be ignored any longer. And that includes thinking about how we want the legacy we want to leave behind to the next generation of people. And we're really lucky to be joined by John Sauter. He is a trust and estates lawyer, been doing this work for a long time. He's with Cordell & Cordell, who's recently launched a trust and estates division. And one of the things I used to hear back when I was a consumer reporter all the time is, I don't have to worry about this because if I go first, everybody knows I've had this wife of 50 years. She'll get everything and then she can distribute to the kids. It doesn't often turn out that simply for folks, does it?
It doesn't. It doesn't always go as you plan, right? In that instance, what you're talking about there, because you're right, we're talking about property ownership when we're talking about estate planning, and a husband and wife own property jointly. Mm-hmm. So the trick there is when one of them passes away, the other one automatically inherits it 100%. However, you're making a lot of assumptions about what that surviving spouse, we call it, what position they're in at that time, right? A lot of times, both of the couple is elderly, and that surviving spouse may not have the wherewithal to do what needs to be done to make sure that that next step is taken.
So interesting. I just finished an old Grisham book on vacation called The Summons, which is really about a will and a trust. So I think for our listening audience, explain the difference between the two.
That's a great question because a lot of people don't understand this. Despite the fact that this is something that happens to all of us, we never really get educated at any point. And so a will is a document that tells the court what you want to happen with your property, right?
Yeah.
Now, the key term there is court, right? A will isn't effective unless you've turned it into the court. The court's proven it's valid, and then it's named and appointed the people you named in the will, okay? In my experience, most people don't want their family to go to court after they've passed. In fact, in my experience, most people don't want to go to court, right? And so what we do with a trust is avoid court altogether, right? And instead of saying in that will, here's what I want to happen, we create this trust. And this is where they probably stop listening to me, trust, and then they just turn off, right? Mm-hmm. But a simple way to explain a trust is it's like an empty box with a set of instructions on the lid, okay? Everything I put in that box is going to go by those instructions. And the reason we end up in court is because nobody knows what we wanted to happen with our property, and your name's on it, right? You've got a vehicle with your name on the title. Where does it go to next? Nobody knows. We assume the family, but who is that, right? And in what proportion and all that. And so we write this trust, and you tell us what the terms are going to be. You put your property in there, and then it passes based upon what you wrote on those terms.
Are there amounts of money do you need to be leaving behind at least $1 million in property and assets before it's worth it to pay a little bit more for a trust up front than it is to have a will drafted? Or is it pretty much the best choice for everybody in your estimation?
That's a great point because it's a common misconception, right? That, I don't need a trust. I don't even have an estate, right? But everybody does. Everybody has property, right? And if you've got anything anywhere that says your name on it, you have to make a plan for what happens when you're no longer here. Or the other thing people don't think about, because we all don't want it to happen, you're incapacitated, right? You get sick, you're unavailable, you can't manage your property. Who's going to do that for you? And that's what estate planning is. And so the whole thing with the trust is we don't have a crystal ball, right? And I don't know what the future holds. And so if I'm going to make a plan and say, I want this person to manage my property and give it to this person, and we're thinking hopefully 30, 40 years down the road, what's to say those people are going to be available? What's to say they're going to be in a place to do that? What happens if your plan fails? That's where the trust is. It's not about how much money you have. It's about the ability to control what happens with your property, regardless of what the future holds.
Speaking of how much money you have, where do we stand right now in terms of if you die and what the government can tax you've already been taxed on that money the whole time, your whole life, and now they want to tax you on the way out too. Where do we stand on that figure?
Yeah, death tax, right?
Yep.
And that's something that scares a lot of people and motivates people to come talk to us, right? And on the federal level, the way they handle this is there's an exemption amount that if you have anything less than that, you get zero tax.
And do you know that number now? or-
14 million for an individual. Okay. And so everybody turns off right now and says 14 million, no problem. I don't have any worries as far as taxes.
Frank's
go.
in trouble, but the rest of us are fine. We're fine.
However, that number is the highest it's ever been in history, right? So 25 years ago, that exemption amount was $600,000. Okay.
Really? So it keeps going up.
Well, so far, right? But at some point in my experience, when things tend to move really far one way, they swing back at some point, right? And so the way that the government might see that as missed tax revenue as opposed to a benefit it's providing, right? And so at some point that is controlled by Congress and they determine what that exemption amount is. And let's say for some reason they need more money. Wouldn't it be really easy to just dip their hand into that flow of money from one generation to the next? And so I would say we're in a great place right now, right? Not jokingly, it's a great time to pass if you've got $14 million, right? Better than it has been. Will that hold into the future? Nobody can predict it.
When people talk about the great wealth transfer, what do we mean by that?
What we're talking about is that in the next 20 years, right, that some estimates are as high as 86 trillion. Some go all the way up to maybe 160 trillion. Will pass from the baby boomer generation to Gen Z, Gen X, right? And so that money that will be inherited is what we call the great wealth transfer.
What about like people say, I don't want to spend the money to get a trust, but in the end, you probably end up saving money by getting a trust. And what are the fees like?
Well, first off, at Cordell & Cordell, all of our fees are transparent, right? So if you go to CordellCordell.com on our website, you will see exactly what you would pay. It's fixed fee. We don't charge hourly for these services. And you'll know at that point how much you will spend for what you want, the plan that you make. Now, will you avoid anything by doing nothing? You might, but your family won't, right? And so the expense that comes out of doing nothing is greater than doing something, right?
And when we talked about this earlier, something I hadn't thought about is having this all mapped out ahead of time is probably more important than ever because we have situations with blended families, with all kinds of things that are just different than they would have been in that June Cleaver model of people staying married for 60 years and then dying and the 3 kids having it evenly distributed.
Yeah, that is a great point. If you're in a second marriage, which Cordell & Cordell, we know a lot about, right? And so if you're in that second marriage, remember we talked earlier about owning things as husband and wife? And so let's say you're in a second marriage and you purchase a house together, which for most people is their greatest asset, right? Their biggest asset. If one of you passes, that house goes to the survivor of you. And then if that person passes, it goes to their heirs. So if you've got a second marriage, the survivor wins, right? That first family that you had, if you died first, you could have accidentally disinherited them by not having a plan for what happens if you pass first.
Wow.
Right?
Have you dealt with many of those cases yet?
I have, because not only do we do estate planning, but we do probate, which is what happens when you don't do the plan. And it's a hard discussion when you've got a family in there, and hopefully you've got some kind of relationship with the surviving spouse, right? Because now the cards are in their hands. They get to determine, are they going to protect their family or their deceased spouse's family?
It's almost, in fact, there have been movies written about it, or there have been movies about it, books about it, that, that horrible first family neglect. Like a guy is married for 25 years and then he marries the second wife and then she gets all the money, and it just seems terrible.
Yeah. It's a plot line that unfortunately I think you see in real life a lot. John Sauter from Cordell & Cordell, if somebody said, you know what, I'm taking this off my procrastination list and putting it on my to-do list, how do they reach out to you?
Well, the best place is through CordellCordell.com. If you go to the estate planning practice on there, you can book a link. There's a free initial consultation. You come talk to us. I'll explain in deeper what this is. You can always call our offices. Our number is easily Googled. And we would be happy to set up a consult.
And we should say that John is a proud graduate of DeSmet East. otherwise known as St. Louis Shoe High. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, you always have to get those in there, don't you?
John, we appreciate it. Thank you. We'll take a short time out. We'll be right back.
St. Louis.
Course, great to have all of you listening as well. We've loved hearing from you on the Royal Banks of Missouri text line. Several of you had questions that I think we got to all of them and were able to answer with our friend John Sauter from Trust and Estates Division at Cordell and Cordell about that, because that can be complicated stuff as well. Many of you touched as well by Allie Rand, who we had early in the show, talking about what's going on with the tornadoes and being on the front line as she is as a volunteer with tornado cleanup in St. Louis. A lot of you looking for ways to continue to be part of the solution. Because, you know, the thing is, Frank, it was just, we were all lucky. Anybody who didn't have the mile-wide swath of destruction that we saw through the Central West End, Clayton, and into North St. Louis, we were just lucky. That could have just as easily been our neighborhoods as well. And I kind of feel like it's how people looked at it in New Orleans. If they weren't affected by Katrina, they had an obligation to help support those who were.
You know, I didn't ask Allie, but I'm wondering, she's just a resident And I wonder what she was doing with her life before this. And now all of a sudden, she has a full-time job.
Yeah, I mean, she's well known
Dedicating her life to it.
as a marketing professional here in town, but she has definitely put things on hold because there's just so much to do and so many people who do want to help, and she wants to help be a conduit between those things for sure. Okay, I have a little question for you and Connor. I want to see how well you guys do on this. When you look back at, and Connor, you brought this up in different scenarios, how when we look back at the age of stars, that the Golden Girls were in their mid 50s during that.
People used to look older.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
The short of it.
Have you ever seen the Tom Brady thing at age 45? They have a picture of him next to Ken Stabler at 38, who Stabler looks
I
like
think I
he's
showed you the Stabler picture.
Yeah, he looked like he's 75.
He looked like he was in his 70s.
That's all over social media, those two right next to each other.
Okay,
I've got a million of them.
If you remember, so Maude, right, from the Golden Girls, speaking of which, and her mom on the show, guess what their actual ages are during the show's heyday?
Because you're bringing this up, I'm going to go low on Maude. She looked like she was 70, let's say 55.
She was 63, so she kind of was on the average. And then how old do you think the character who played her mom was?
Looked like she was 80, 70?
62.
Oh my gosh, that woman was 62?
Yes. Okay, so the age, this is one of my favorite ones so far. The age of the Jeffersons. So George and Wheezy, when they were the age of the actual actors playing their characters when the show started.
Hemsley.
Yes.
I'd say he, let me just take a stab. He looked like he was 45.
Okay, that's not a bad guess. How about Isabel Sanford, the actress who played his wife on the show?
She actually looks like she could be 50.
Okay, so the actual age of the stars when the Jeffersons were at their heyday, she was 59 and he was 38.
He was 38.
So isn't it funny that they had a 19-year delta, but they felt like he was losing his hair, but I think they felt like they looked close enough in age they could do that. Okay, this one was a little interesting to me. Ages of the Mary Tyler Moore cast when they started. So if how old do you think that Mary Tyler Mary Tyler Moore, that character she was when the show started?
Well, she had the Dick Van Dyke runs. I mean, she's 25, 35. I bet she was 34.
Good guess. 33.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was
Frank's locked on with this.
She was beautiful. Oh my goodness. Gosh.
Yeah. For sure. Ted Knight,
who played Ted Baxter. Now, he had that white hair. I'm going to say he was 48.
Okay, I think that's a pretty good guess. And he was actually at that time 46.
Okay.
I only know Ted Knight from Caddyshack.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never seen him in anything else.
Okay, and then
great in everything.
how old? This one got me. I was way off on this one. How old was Ed Asner? He was the news director.
Yeah. Mr. Grant, Lou Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think he was attractive?
No.
Because it seemed like a lot of women on that, I guess it's on the show. Yeah, they really liked him. Let's say, now he looked like he was like 65, but he was probably 52.
40.
What?
That one got me.
Asner was 40?
Yes. And then speaking of that, how old do you think Florence Henderson was?
Florence Henderson from...
Remember, she played one of the neighbors.
No, that wasn't Florence Henderson.
Oh no, that was no. What is her name? Now I'm forgetting.
Cloris Leachman?
Cloris Leachman. Thank you. I totally had that wrong.
Yeah.
Brady Bunch is Florence Henderson.
I bet she was 40.
She was 44, so she was just a couple years younger.
How about Rhoda Morgenstern?
Yes, she was the youngest in the whole crew. She was only 30.
Yeah, she was beautiful.
And then Maury, do you remember what that actor's name was?
Oh gosh.
I can't remember either.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was 39.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was definitely a fun one. How about one of your favorite shows ever? How old was Jerry Seinfeld and Jason Alexander when the show started? How old were they?
I'll go 35-ish.
I think Jerry was older. I think Jerry was like 40.
Okay, and then how old do you think that
George Costanza
was?
He's younger than him. I think he was like 34.
Yeah. I'd say that.
Okay, so you have the Delta right, but you got the ages right, 35 and 29. Jason Alexander was
Okay.
only 29.
Yeah, he's only 29.
Yeah, he was losing his hair, so I
like
think that.
very bald and
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you hear what he said at the Emmys? He said, they asked him, or no, I think they asked him about how I helped to get Kramer Emmys. I helped to get Julia Louis-Dreyfus Emmys. And he said, yeah, with Jerry, there's only so much I could do.
Okay, how about All in the Family actors?
Archie Bunker, 45.
Okay, yeah. Carol O'Connor, you're saying you thought he only looked like he was 45?
Well, somebody texted.
He's looking at the text line.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how about Gene Stapleton?
Edith Bunker.
Archie?
I'd say in that, maybe 42.
Okay, so this
She's
one,
looked like a little young.
yeah, this one was, I think, one that would get a lot of people surprised because I would have thought they were in their 70s. I mean, maybe it was just because I was a kid in the 70s watching it, but they were 48 and 49. Final one before we let everybody go. How old do you think Fred Sanford was during the height of his show?
Fred G. Sanford. I'll go 55.
He looked like he was like 70 though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe 60.
Believe it or not, he was only 49 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. I think
He
the text
played like
line.
a 75-year-old guy.
Right. The text line folks would have definitely beat me hands down. I would have been in last place on that. Alice from the Brady Bunch was 43. That's a good one as well. Great show coming up tomorrow. You get reunited with Dr. Rick and Joe Hollum and Frank. They'll be on the show. Lots of things happening. Good stories in the health front that we're going to want to talk about, as well as Joe's been breaking all kinds of news.
Sounds great. We'll take a break. We'll be back in 22.
Now there's a new way to take charge of your blood sugar.